There are houses that become abandoned. There are houses that become forgotten. And then there are houses that seem to remember. This is the story of an old house known locally as Blackwood House. Place surrounded by reports of unexplained footsteps, voices, lights turning on by themselves, and a strange sound that witnesses described as someone walking through the house every night. The story is based on the kind of real paranormal reports that have been documented around old, isolated properties. Some details have been dramatized for storytelling, but the fear surrounding the house was very real to the people who experienced it. Blackwood House stood at the end of a narrow road outside a small American town. It had been built more than a century ago. The house was large, with 3 floors, wooden walls, tall windows, and a narrow staircase leading to the attic. During the day, it looked like nothing more than an old abandoned property. But after sunset, people avoided it. For decades, neighbors claimed they could see lights moving behind the upstairs windows. Sometimes a single light appeared in the attic. Sometimes the front door seemed to open and close by itself. And almost every night, someone reported hearing footsteps. Slow footsteps, starting from the basement, moving up the stairs, then crossing the hallway, and finally stopping outside the bedroom on the 2nd floor. The strangest part? Nobody lived there. The house had been empty for years. Then in the summer of 1998, a man named Daniel Miller bought the property. Daniel was a photographer who had recently moved to the area. He had heard the stories, but he didn't believe them. To him, Blackwood House was simply an old building that needed repairs. On his first evening there, Daniel laughed when a neighbor warned him. "Don't stay upstairs after midnight," the old man said. Daniel smiled. Why? The neighbor looked toward the house, because that's when the house wakes up. Daniel thought it was a joke. That night, he went to sleep around 11:30. At exactly 2:13 a.m., he woke up. There was a sound outside his bedroom. Footsteps. 1, 2, 3. Slow footsteps walking across the wooden hallway. Daniel sat up. The footsteps stopped. He waited. Nothing. He opened his bedroom door. The hallway was empty. He checked every room. Nothing. Daniel convinced himself that the old wooden floor had simply moved because of the temperature. Then he returned to bed. A few minutes later, the footsteps began again, but this time they were coming toward his bedroom. Daniel froze. The footsteps stopped directly outside his door. He stared at the handle. It slowly moved downward. The door opened about an inch, then stopped. Daniel whispered, "Hello?" No answer. He pulled the door open. There was nobody there, but at the end of the hallway, he saw a woman standing beside the staircase. She was wearing an old white dress. Her face was turned away from him. Daniel blinked. The woman disappeared. He immediately turned on every light in the house. He didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, Daniel told himself that he had dreamed it, but while checking his camera equipment, he discovered something disturbing. His camera had been sitting on a table downstairs. It was turned on, and somehow it had taken 6 photographs during the night. Daniel opened the first photograph. It showed the hallway. The second showed the staircase. The third showed his bedroom door. The fourth showed an empty corridor. The fifth showed the attic stairs. And the 6th photograph made his blood run cold. It showed Daniel himself, standing in the hallway, asleep, but the photograph had been taken from inside his bedroom. Daniel immediately left the house. He spent the night at a motel. The following day, he contacted the previous owner, an elderly woman named Margaret Blackwood. Margaret had lived in the house as a child. When Daniel showed her the photograph, she became silent. Then she said something he would never forget. "She still walks." Daniel asked who she meant. Margaret told him about a woman named Evelyn, who had lived in the house decades earlier. According to Margaret, Evelyn had lost her young daughter during a winter illness. After the child's death, Evelyn became obsessed with searching the house every night. She believed her daughter was still inside. She would walk from room to room calling her name. Then, one night, Evelyn disappeared. Nobody knew exactly what happened. Some believed she had left the town. Others believed she had died inside the house. But Margaret claimed something different. After Evelyn disappeared, she said, people kept hearing her footsteps. Daniel asked, "Where?" Margaret looked directly at him. "Everywhere." That should have been enough to make Daniel sell the property. Instead, he became obsessed. He wanted an explanation. Over the next several weeks, he installed cameras throughout the house. He placed recording equipment in the hallway. He recorded the basement, the staircase, the attic, and the second-floor bedroom. For several nights, nothing happened. Then, on the seventh night, one camera captured something. At 2:13 a.m., the hallway light turned on. A few seconds later, a shadow appeared at the far end of the corridor. It slowly moved toward the camera, but there was no visible person, only a dark shape. The recording continued. Then a woman's voice whispered, "Where is she?" Daniel listened to the recording dozens of times. The voice was unmistakable, a woman's voice, but nobody was inside the house. Daniel decided to investigate the attic. He found old boxes filled with photographs, letters, and newspapers. One newspaper article caught his attention. It described the disappearance of Evelyn Blackwood. The article was dated decades earlier. According to the report, Evelyn had disappeared after claiming that she could hear her daughter's voice coming from the attic. Daniel searched the attic carefully. Behind an old wooden wall, he found something unexpected. A small child's room. Inside was an old wooden bed, a broken doll, and dozens of scratches carved into the wall. Most of them were simple lines, but one phrase had been scratched repeatedly. "She is still here." Daniel called the police. The wall was examined. Nothing unusual was discovered. But that night, Daniel decided to sleep in the house one final time. He placed cameras around his bedroom. Then he went to bed. At 2:13 a.m., the footsteps started. This time, they were louder. They came from the basement. Step, step, step. Then the stairs creaked. One by one, the footsteps climbed toward the second floor. Daniel grabbed his flashlight. The footsteps stopped outside his bedroom. Then came 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel whispered, "Who are you?" Silence. Then a child's voice answered from the hallway. "Daddy?" Daniel stopped breathing. He knew there was no child in the house. The voice spoke again. "Daddy, please open the door." Daniel stayed frozen. The door handle slowly turned. But before the door could open, another voice screamed from somewhere upstairs. A woman's voice. "Run!" The bedroom door slammed open. Daniel ran. He didn't look back. He rushed down the staircase and out of the house. Behind him, he heard footsteps racing down the stairs. But when he reached the front yard and turned around, there was nobody there. Every window in the house was dark, except one, the attic window. A figure was standing behind it. A woman, watching him. Daniel never entered Blackwood House again. He sold the property months later, but according to local reports, the house continued to generate strange stories. A contractor who entered the property claimed he heard someone walking behind him. A delivery driver reported seeing a woman standing in an upstairs window. Another visitor claimed that a child's voice whispered his name. And then there was the most disturbing report of all. Years later, a new owner installed security cameras. One night, the camera recorded movement inside the empty hallway. At 2:13 a.m., a figure appeared at the top of the stairs. It slowly walked downstairs, stopped in the living room, turned toward the camera, and disappeared. The recording was reportedly reviewed several times. There was no visible explanation. No person entered the house. No animal was detected. Nothing moved except the figure. Today, people still tell stories about the house. Some say it was haunted. Others believe the strange events were caused by old pipes, shifting wood, electrical problems, shadows, and the human imagination. And perhaps that's the truth. Perhaps every sound had an explanation. Perhaps every shadow was nothing more than darkness. Perhaps the footsteps were simply an old wooden floor reacting to the cold. But there is one question nobody has ever answered. Why did the footsteps always begin at exactly 2:13 a.m.? And why did they always stop outside the same bedroom? Because according to those who claim to have heard them, the house doesn't become quiet when the footsteps stop. That's when the house begins to listen. So if you ever find yourself driving down a lonely road and you see an old house standing alone in the darkness, with one light glowing in an upstairs window, don't stop, don't knock, and whatever you do, don't answer. If something inside whispers your name, because some houses are abandoned, some houses are haunted, But there are few houses that never truly sleep.